So up next, let's hear what investors see from the point of view on investing in AI. Let's welcome Nancy Yang of CloudAlpha Capital, Song Mao of Qualcomm Ventures, and Arjun Kharpal of CNBC, and see where the conversation takes us.
So Nancy, I just want to kick off with you. You've invested in companies from chip companies through to autonomous car companies. What is your investment ideas, your investment thesis around artificial intelligence?
Sure. I'm dedicated in this area. I have been investing since 2012. For the private companies, I invested more than 10 companies, including Horizon Robotics. I'm the first investor of that company, and also autonomous driving company, Neuro.ai. And Kneron. And then, so my thinking for the long term is that, I really believe that in the future, if you're looking at the human history, and the more and more and technology development trends, there are two major trends that is facing to the mankind. First is more and more people will live in the virtual world, and secondly, human participation in the physical world will becoming less and less, and they are all happening now. So eventually, we will be having we will need the enabling from the machine, human, robotics. But for those personal intelligent robot, it's a great thing. But now it's too early stage. It really requires a lot of, it's wonderful things, but it's it's a very, very long term. For now, we should invest in each parts of it who can enable those things happen. For example, for human, for future human home robotics, the most important thing is the sensing. So I invested in the robotics autonomous driving company who are specialized in the sensing, which is a most important part for the future home robotics, and also chips, and then each part of it will lead towards my future dream of that. Yes.
And Song, for you, one area you've been focusing on is edge AI. Can you just lay out for us what that really means and essentially how that feeds into your investment thesis?
So actually, Qualcomm China, we started to invest in AI part since 2014, 15, that age. And our idea about AI is, at that time, we started thinking about, okay, AI will be a very big thing. The big thing means that this technology will be impact on almost every perspective of our lives. So for the first stage, about 2-3 years, we started investing in the very key and core technologies in the AI sector. So we invest in the SenseTime and Kneron for the computer vision part, and also for the Unison and also the Adabook from the voice part. And after that, we noticed that there are very massive kind of business model coming out in China market. So we started investing two directions. Number one is we invest in the AI applications, the use cases in the verticals. So like autonomous driving, ADAS, or within all the detection part. So that is AI to replace the human labors. And another direction is that we start to invest in the long tail kind of AI platforms. In that case, is that that use case is not very accuracy oriented, but it's long tail and cost sensitive kind of way. So we invest in a kind of a company called Extreme Vision. The funny part is we noticed that for the age part, the age AI is becoming a very clear trend. The point I want to make is that if we look at the age AI, or we look at the whole thing is called age computing, you can see that from a lot of third-party research, it says that by year 2025, that's 75% of the data is actually be processed by the decentralized kind of the processors, and we have over 30 billion kind of a device connected. But if you're looking at the driver behind, is that we have several trends here. Number one is the demand for latencies. So we have a lot of kind of use case there. We require a low latencies, such as like autonomous driving, right? You can never imagine if we have to have to send the data from the terminal to the cloud process and goes back to that. That cannot work, right? And number one. Number two is we call it the demand for the cost, which means that for the especially for the AI part, right? Because comparing with traditional sensors, the AI sensors such as camera or voice, microphone, sorry, they will generate a lot more data than the traditional sensors. So it's really not cost effective to transmit all the data back to the cloud. And the third thing is about privacies and also the securities. So which means the AI, funny part is AI is the way to help the machine to understand the human world. So if we use the cameras or the microphones, the message or the information we collect is very, very private. So all the things add up together is the key drivers to we have to know that the age AI is coming, and we have to accept that.
Well, that's a great way to lay out the scene for us, guys. So I want to talk a little bit about what's happening right now, because, of course, we've got the ongoing coronavirus pandemic. And, a lot of the conversation from technology companies has been around the fact that, oh, look, this has really accelerated some trends, either whether that be e-commerce, the increasing digitization of various industries, working from home, etc. I mean, we're doing this over a Zoom call right now rather than in person. So when you look at what's happened as a result of the coronavirus, how has that changed or your investment thesis? How has that sort of changed the trends you're looking at all, or has it in any way? Nancy, let me start with you.
If we think about this, for those factors who can be which can be causing the structural changes to the sectors, we're starting to looking at from the application side. We observed that application side on the consumer side, there's the obvious trend, the increased adoption for the work from home, and you might see paradigm shift on the applications on e-commerce, food delivery, and entertainment, and education, etc. It has changed a lot. And then on the enterprise side, for those when it requires no touch in order of working use case, so it will largely speed up the AI enabled medical in different value chain, including diagnosis and also in a pre-diagnosis, and also an AI have more collaboration with auto. You might see a lot of food delivery using the autonomous cars instead of the food delivery person, and also delivering the goods to the areas, hospital, etc. Those cars, and also you see speed it up for the AI collaborate with retail, or where there no one serve you, but you can still buying stuff, and especially the AI plus the manufacturing during the coronavirus period. There's not much factory still working except Tesla China factory, because it's fully automated. So this really will speed up the adoption for the automation for those manufacturing companies, and then because you have those drivers from the application side, on the C side, on the consumer side, for the household, they might need to have the demand to buy more iPad, more screens. You're gonna have the demand for replacing a new iPhone, etc., to have a better work from home experience, and for your kids to educate online. So devices have a very strong demand, and then that will drive the cloud development. The cloud companies, they're adding capex on the servers. It's driving more data. It requires more storage, more computing. So it will definitely speeding up the computing chips and storage, right? So then it will go to infrastructure, so have a big impact to the infrastructure, data, cloud infrastructure, cloud we see that trend is national globally, and also together with those, especially I want to mention China. China played a very important role for this global, coronavirus thing. Yeah, China contributed a lot. So together with that, we see more and more is acceleration for China's own replacement cycle for those semi and hardware company. It's together with the China-U.S. tension. So all those factors adding together, there are a lot of structural fundamental changes to our technology sectors. It's definitely a very positive thing. Yeah.
And Song, from your perspective, where are you seeing any kind of changes happening right now as a result of the pandemic?
Yeah, I actually agree with you. I mean, the coronavirus things actually is, I'm sorry to say this, but it's a very positive kind of signals for the AI development. So what we've seen is before this coronavirus, I have kind of, when I look at the companies who doing this AI labor replacement, there is always kind of pushback from the company side or the factory side, because to replace labor is a very hard thing to do, which means they have to change their assembly line, they have to fire or lay off their workers, they have to change the whole layout of their factories to deploy the new machines, right? But after coronavirus, their demand for labor replacement by machine is more urgent and solid. So because what happened in China is for the labor-intensive kind of work, it is not very easy and healthy to lay a lot of people working together because it's kind of dangerous. And even more is that during coronavirus, during the Spring Festival, when the workers going back home, it is really hard to get them back because sometimes the city just blocked down, right? So, and which means the labor kind of became unstable for the factory side. So right now what I'm seeing is that, from 2B side, is that almost every factory is seeking out a way to find robotics, find AI solutions, machines to replace the humans. So what happened in the testing world, which means a lot of testing workers be replaced by the AI things, and also call centers. You can see that the call centers, a lot of people, right? So they utilize the AI things to replace the human beings as ours. Yeah, that's what happening.
So let me just follow up with that as well, because you're obviously very positive on the momentum that's happening right now in artificial intelligence and development of that. But where do you see some of the big challenges coming along the road? Is it coming from regulation? Is it coming from, what we're seeing globally around this tech decoupling happening between the US and China? Where for you, Song, are the challenges right now?
Well, the challenges here, from really pure business perspective, the number one challenge is about the cost. So every factory will have this kind of thinking about, okay, if I want to replace human beings by machines, so how we change the cost structures, right? So like for the laborers, human beings, you pay them monthly, but for the machines, you pay them upfront. So what is the payback time? And here's the thing I mentioned about AI, why it's very important. Think about this way, just give you one example. We have invested in company who doing the bearing and the loader kind of testing things, right? So in the assembly lines, every 1 second, there will be 3 loaders or bearings coming out. And previously, they just utilized the humans, kind of testing workers to do that. However, if you replace with the machines, for each one loader, you will have 10 cameras behind to look at it. Each camera will just picture it like 30 frames per second, and each frame will have 2 million kind of pixel resolutions. So if you utilize the AI kind of GPU servers to process all this data, that is almost impossible. And not to mention to send it back to the cloud side, right? So you have to do the local things, and you have to do better kind of cost-effective ways to do that. That's why we call it Edge AI. It's very important. So what we do is we actually separate the computations to put part of it in the camera side, part of it in the edge side, and part of it in the cloud side, so that the company side, the factory side can accept the cost-wise to replace the humans. I think that's number one challenge there.
And Nancy, for you, I mean, in your last answer there, you mentioned that the rising tensions between the U.S. and China. Do you see that as a issue or a risk for the development of AI technology? You know, a large part of what the argument around the conversation between the US and China is around data, and it's around where data is stored, where data is going, and AI, of course, is very heavily reliant on data. So how do you see the risk from the rising tensions between the two countries?
Let me start from, the development of AI has experienced, the hype stage triggered by, the AlphaGo defeat human in 2016. And then there's a disappointment caused by, the difficulty of actual landing the use cases in after that in 2018, and then emergence of ethical issues such as deepfake, those fake videos in 2019. But now I think overall, we're now entered a stage of the steady and a realistic stage that about to rise. And now under this China-US tension, this background, I think that there's nothing can really stop in China from on the demand side. There's only some bottleneck on the about 28 nanometers, and for the really high advanced nodes. And then so I think there's for China, the organic driver for the developing technology AI is still I think nothing different from previously. It's really developing really fast, driven by strong demand side. But however, if we're looking at for the longer term, I think if we really need to develop the high end, I think that some issues need to be solved. The bottleneck things like EUV, etc. So I think there's still some uncertainties, but for now, I think there are some solutions around that. So for example, like High Silicon, they license their IP to those startup companies. So it might have some, so get around with those regulations. So I'm still very positive, bullish for the future for the AI development in China. Yes.
Song, I just want to ask you quickly about another, trend that's been happening in the world of technology, and that's really about regulation, increasing regulation, or at least increasing talk about regulation towards technology as a whole. Do you feel that will play or is a risk factor going forward? The European Union, for example, talking about regulating facial recognition. The US talk about regulating some of the big technology companies with AI as part of that. So is regulation a key risk on your horizon, Song?
Well, we definitely need to consider about regulations. Right? There's some factors there. We see a lot of the regulation kind of issues happen around the world. But you know what, you just say this way. So in general, the convenience and the security are something, a trade-off. It cannot just happen at once, right? So if we give the people more convenience, that means you sacrifice some of the securities there. So the regulation actually helps on this part. We can just find out the balance between these two. So we have the regulation there. Maybe we find a way to balance, to under this regulation, we still can do the facial recognition to give people this convenience, because convenience is kind of a demand. If you're looking at back about our history, all our new inventions is about this make people life better. So I'm positive about that, but definitely I will looking up the regulation kind of factors when I do the investment.
Cool. We've got so much more to talk about, but we're almost out of time. So I just want to finish off by asking you each a question. Forward looking, give us your best investment idea, your best investment trend. What is it? Nancy, I'll start with you.
I still, from on the big platform company, we still believe in TSMC, and then companies like NVIDIA, who have benefit from the longer term structure trends. And for early stage, still looking for application-driven for autonomous driving for those, because auto EV is developing really fast in China or globally, is across the chasm stage. So I think that although there's long cycle, but for a company like Kneron who target really earlier, companies that we really have high expectation for.
And Song?
Well, it's a very tough question. So, yeah. So what I'm thinking right now is that we actually at the time point from 4G to 5G, and based on our observations previously, we said for every change for 2G to 3G, 3G to 4G, for 5G, after the bandwidth goes up, the latency goes down, we can always see a very brand new kind of user behaviors coming out, and can just give birth to a really good unicorns. So what I'm looking at is after the 5G actually launched, I'm looking for some kind of new user behaviors use case within the 5G world, the real 5G use case, and something, make people more comfortable to use 5G, and something only 5G can provide. But behind that, that means for the infrastructure wise, for the device wise, for the module wise, there will be a change supporting that. That is what I'm thinking right now.
Fantastic. Nancy and Song, thank you so much for your insights. That was a great conversation. And for all of you guys watching out there, we really hope you enjoyed the chat just there. Thank you from all of us, and stay safe.
Thank you. Mm-hmm.